I don't know if the birds will be too noisy out here, but they're probably quieter than my children. Today, I found my first morels, and I didn't just find one type of morel. I found two on the same day. So, because I will likely never get this opportunity again, I'm going to explain to you the differences between the two. So on the outsides here we have probably Morchella importuna, which is part of the black morels clade, the elata clade. And then in the middle there we have Morchella vulgaris, I think, which is part of the Esculenta clade, or the yellow morels. The importuna, these ones on the outside, were found on ornamental woodchip outside a garden centre. They are the most commonly found, the most common type of morel in the UK, and they're relatively predictable and turn up on that kind of dark ornamental barky woodchip that you find outside new builds and supermarkets and garden centres and places like that. The one in the middle was found on chalky soil on a hill with elm and ash trees in the south of the UK. And these Esculenta clade, like I say, I think this is vulgaris. I've never found them before, so that is based on my understanding of them. But what I wanted to say about them is that these clades are complex and not as well understood as they could be, and it can be quite hard to get to species, so getting to clade is likely to be good enough. So you can say it's probably importuna, but it's in the black morels clade, or it's probably vulgaris, but it's in the yellow morels clade. And that's good enough for identification. So habitat on its own is quite useful in these cases, but then the way that these ridges and pits and things are formed is quite different on the two, so I wanted to show them side by side. The importuna, these ones on the outside, are quite young, so they're quite kind of tucked together still and have quite limited open pits, but you can see, I think I can see, that they have a much more linear up and down. They've got very obvious kind of vertical ridges and then connecting horizontal ridges in between, whereas the vulgaris has these big open irregular honeycomb shaped pits, but it doesn't have vertical and horizontal. Like when these open up, when the importuna open up, they start looking really very like a ladder, where the horizontal ridges between the vertical ridges look like rungs on a ladder. Whereas the vulgaris will never do that. It'll just be irregular and honeycombish and just very different looking. The colour is different as well, but interestingly, this vulgaris that I've found is really quite dark, despite being in the yellow morels clade, and the importuna are paler than I've seen them before, despite being in the black morels clade. So whilst the colour is different, and can be quite useful in separating them once you're in a clade, it doesn't necessarily stick to the name that the clade is given, the expected kind of colours. So yeah, not as helpful as you would think. Other than that, they are really quite similar. There is one called Semilibera, which has less obvious connection between the bottom of the cap and the stipe. So it has a kind of stipe that goes up inside a bit, and then it comes back down to join the edge. If I find one this season, I will do a separate video on that. But these are all quite similar. They're hollow inside. In fact, this one had been nibbled by something, so I can show you that they're hollow inside. Look at that. Completely hollow, all the way down to the bottom. And all Morchella are hollow like that. So things like Gyrometra, which we somewhat confusingly refer to as false morels, are not hollow like that beautifully all the way through. They have this kind of convoluted wibbly-wobbly bits in the middle. And Semilibera, as I say, kind of goes, the stipe goes up inside the cap and then comes back down to meet the edge. But yeah, these are Morchella, two different types of Morchella in two different clades, and they're rather lovely.